walk on the wild side, and the colored girls go do 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 do.
The truth is, I used to know a place that was better. There's a little hole in the wall, West Village coffee house called the Opera Booth. We did plays. Made a living peddling coffee and pastry and greasy sandwiches. Twice a night we did plays. I was one of us. Them. There. Them. The booth. It's the first place that did that. First place where we got together and did plays. After writing about it, we were going to be a hit, get a review, or become a star, or take it to Broadway, or get a grant, or anything else in God's forsaken garner in every underworld, except whether we wanted to do it. We got away with it by calling it a coffee house, but what it was a temple. I was 16, and I was bleeding. I was naked from the waist down. 3 sailors had picked me up on the turnpike. And when they found out I wasn't a real girl, they got tough. I was a mixed-up kid. They mixed me up a little more. They tore off my skirt, worked me over with my Scarlet O'Hara cork-sole wedgies and left me face down on the Greenwich Village street, upset of rusty mattress springs. I started at the bottom. Some of the sailors. And I don't think I could ever have gotten up if I hadn't heard this music. Some dippy music. Classical music. Opera it was. I was shaken and sick. And my lower lip was torn by the mattress springs. And I was covered in blood and shit. Cum. I thought I'd lost my left eye. At first I thought I was hearing offstage death music like some Tennessee Williams character. And I wanted to get up and run for it. At first I had to get up. And then I wasn't. And I could blurrily see cars and people passing at both ends of this one block-long side street. And I saw a cop silhouette at the end of the street, like a penguin piggy bank. I was scared and shivering like the time they circumcised my baby brother. But I started dragging myself along the street like an alligator, groveling toward that music, some soprano cracking the top of her skull with high notes. And pretty soon I reached his dreary doorway, and I was by then, believe me, in no shape for the senior prom. I couldn't breathe. And I thought it was all over until I realized the sailors had left these 2 poppers shoved up my nose, which was where most of the blood was coming from. So I sneezed those out so I could breathe a little, and inch by inch I dragged myself along those colorful West Village walls towards this looping, soaring sound. And I wasn't helped any by the fact that the place the sound was coming from had a lot of blinking colored lights out front. I could hardly focus. I kept hearing this funny noise, which was, as it turned out, me, whimpering like a sick kitten. So I put a stop to that right quick and kept on crawling the walls towards Disneyland or whatever it was, because now I had a goal in life: to get to that joint and stop that infernal screeching. So half naked and bleeding the ass like Dylan Thomas. In my toga turban, with the wooden grapes rattling, I trailed gore right up that ditzy damn street until I stood wavering in front of this unlikely place with the name Opera Buffo across the front doors in green and gold glitter. And I fell against the doors, and they fell open, and I would have fallen too if my turban hadn't got tangled in this mobile over the entrance. So there I was, clawing up my hair and yelping. And then these shadowy figures at the rear of this insane coffee house stood up and started towards me. There were all these little flickering little ice cream lights everywhere. And the walls were covered with magazine pages and movie posters and classical reproduction. And the people were dressed like a circus clown. And one like something out of the Hitler Youth Movement, with a glittering necklace of swastikas, and another like a Romany gypsy. And on this little stage in the center, a blonde girl, like Botticelli's Venus, was doing a dance with a quadruple amputee. I thought I flipped. But then the circus clown, Buffo, came into the light. And he had this little bristly beard, the biggest eyes you ever saw. He said in this atrociously phony Italian accent, "Start the show again, Bambini. We hope the customer." I screamed, "Stop the goddamn music! Stop it!" And then he saw what I looked like and he yelled, "Stop the Casta Diva! That's not a ladylike way to talk!" Well, then my hair was free and I ran. God knows with what strength. I ran the length of that incredible place to the record player, right across the stage, right between the blonde and the amputee. I grabbed that record and I smashed it. And then I smashed the pieces. And then I danced on them. And then I fell backwards right into the arms of the gypsy and the Nazi and the Corsican clown. And on the crumbling ceiling was a James Montgomery flag poster saying, "Uncle Sam wants you." And the clown said, "Mamma mia, here's another one. And us not making enough to feed ourselves." Because you see, right then, immediately, he knew for certain I was always going to stay.
Looking back to the first time that I heard about him and her, I remember that they had found a way of life that seemed possible, a way of life that we could all imitate. He worked so hard, and he had such a sensible, down-to-earth attitude, even though you knew he was idealistic underneath it all. He was inspiring and encouraging, and of course, handsome and young. Well, young for a president. And she? Well, I was always fond of her too. I don't look well dressed the way she dressed. And I think that she let their publicity people, they had their own publicity people, you know. I think maybe she let those advisors talk her into looking, well, maybe a little less distinguished than she might have looked. But after all, she was, well, our ambassadress to the world. And I suppose she had to dress in a way that appealed to the people in the mass. I remember the fashions editor used to say, before it happened, even afterwards, she'd look at pictures of Jackie and she'd say, she looks like a collage of Doris Day's wardrobe, Elizabeth Taylor's makeup, and Natalie Wood's hairdo. Now, I don't think that was kind. I'm sure that if she'd been a private person, Jackie would have dressed with more restraint and taste. Norman Mailer said that she was very attractive in person. I think she was trying to be an ideal to us all.
Mom, I want you to give this to the newspapers in case I am killed. This is what I really feel. The world must be one world, Mom. That is why I continue the war. If I did not, then the Viet Cong would overrun the world, and I'm not sure of their aims. I'm afraid of their leaders. I'm afraid of our leaders too, but at least I know what their aims are. I think Chick is helping me. He says we can't not fight because then we would be killed and die for others' causes. But we are killing men for the sake of ours. Chick says we must not think of it that way. He says we must only fight to save our own lives and not for any cause. He says it is beyond our control. But I am deceiving Chick. I am fighting to make the world one. I cannot sacrifice myself, but I am sacrificing. Oh, I am not. I am getting confused. I have to fight for what I believe in. I must be very sure to understand what I believe in. It will not help to make the world one if it is an evil, misguided world. But isn't that what the other side wants? I don't know. Maybe it doesn't matter what people believe as long as they all believe the same thing. I mustn't jump to conclusions. I must love everybody, and I must kill the men who come at me every day and night out of the jungle. That's what the government says. That's what the church says. That's what Chick says, and that's what I say. That is what Buddha says to me in my visions too. I don't understand it. I'll do it. I've been doing it. I did it today. I'll keep on doing it, but I don't understand. Chick understands.
In '65, I saw the cops and the blacks killing each other on my block in New York, and there wasn't a word of it in the papers. They started bombing Vietnam, Watts blew up. Robbie and I were on the Selma Montgomery March. I have a picture of us with Dick Gregory and Martin Luther King. We were living our lives in front of the television cameras. It was all you read. Then how we lived our age. I slept on the floor of this mud hut in Alabama beside Shirley MacLaine. It was incredible. Everywhere you could see it breaking out. Free stores, hostels, crash pads, free universities, and tons of underground newspapers starting. We were working so hard, but we were living for a living. I printed pamphlets, made incense, wrote, washed dishes, and marched. Robbie was deep into political reading. He had a lot of the cats. An awful lot of the chicks, too, were for a violent revolution, but American kids weren't raised for that. And besides, all the fighting and violence we were trying to stop. Love became a new word. It was everywhere, growing and becoming strong. A bigger love than between two people. People were talking about the Aquarian Age, a new era. I mean, like I told Robbie, if you really believe in reincarnation, you want to make the world better for the next time you come back.
There was this other thing happening, this now generation flower children, this rebellion bit. I was down here where it was happening, but, well, I sort of started this other one, the uptown career bit. Well, once you stop the little dominoes stopping, it's kind of hard to stop them. You feel not unlike an idiot. My friends downtown were doing peace marches and amphetamines, and I was nightclubbing and first nighting and sleeping around. I knew lots of people, I really did. I really do. I could pick up a phone and spend the night with any number of famous people from the 40s and 50s if I wanted to. I never went to bed with anyone for a while. That's true. I never got divorced. I don't say I didn't think of it, in fact. What I sort of did was, there was this agent. He wasn't too bad. Well, he was, but I'd been working in this crummy nightclub dressed in a sequin corset, introducing the acts on amateur night. There were a lot of them, too. Anyway, I'd been doing this sort of a bit for $5, which didn't cover cab fare and makeup. And this agent had started sort of whining and dining me. It was fun. He really did know some solid people who were working and producing shows. He was nice. He kept saying he wanted to do things for me, but he couldn't cast me unless I slept with him. He'd feel I was taking advantage of his tender feelings for me. So, one night I decided, well, I had a few drinks to work myself up to it. And then I had a few more. And then we got back to my place and we had a few more. And we got into bed and he got on top of me, breathed in my face, and I threw up.
were alive, I mean when he was alive, you could never resist reading about what they were doing. They were young and in love, and they seemed to be having such a wonderful time. He could read half a dozen books in a day. He had been a war hero. They even made a movie about it with that actor Clifford Robertson, who later won an Oscar. And you know, it was him that popularized the James Bond books. It's true. They weren't that popular until he mentioned to a reporter that he liked them. And then, well, suddenly everybody was reading James Bond. The movies today are still making millions of dollars. And she was responsible for starting a certain kind of look among young women. Politicians' wives since her have all tried to dress nicely. She popularized the couturier Le Cassini, for instance. And he wrote books too. And one of them won a Pulitzer Prize, really, and while he was still a senator. And do you remember that record, The First Family? It was so funny. It had all these little jokes, good-natured jokes, really, about him and her and his brothers and just everybody. That sold I don't know how many millions of copies. And she, while she was a student at college, she won the Vogue magazine Prix de Paris for her article on her favorite artist she was most likely to know from the past. They were remarkable people. Everything they touched turned to gold.
We were dancing on the beach when they came at us out of the dark. We were all on mescaline. And I thought it was the calm, but it was the MPs. They flashed lights in our eyes and beat us and took us in. I saw them grab Chick, but I didn't interfere. I knew that it was wrong to interfere. I should not fight for others. He wasn't fighting for me. Why should he? Or is he a coward? Am I? Is he made me a coward? But we both killed today. Why didn't we kill the MPs and run into the woods and join the runaway calm? Because you can't take sides, right? But then, what are we still killing Kong in the morning?
Well, in 1966, we were more or less settled on the Lower East Side here studying now. The streets started to be full of these sort of insincere kids. They were television addicts. They were middle-class kids. They were just after the fun and the sex and the funny clothes or the dope or astrology, and I like chin. It's just a vacation for a while. We liked here and we went to San Francisco. It was physically better to live. Dope and acid and abuse we'd been getting in the ghettos and slums. It made us sensitive to what was happening in the country. And nature, I mean, an awful lot of our people in New York were doing hard drugs. We crossed the country by car. Thousands of people did. Along the way, we'd stop by the universities where they were, burning draft cards, starting on acid, getting heavy into civil rights. We met hundreds of kids like ourselves. A new language was growing through the music. The Beatles, Donovan, Dylan. When we hit San Francisco, it was like a new world. The streets were like a carnival. Incredibly young people tripping and digging each other and dying to live.
Buffo was a ballet dancer who got too fat. So he opened a coffee house with the idea that his dance and theater friends could use a place to congregate. Well, he picked such a dumb location that nobody came. He couldn't go home. You're not supposed to be a Sicilian and a ballerina. So his family kept the place going to keep him out of sight. Anyway, after I made my ungainly entrance, the blonde and the amputee had to straddle me in the dressing room, because there are already people sleeping in the scenery loft of the bathroom. The Buffo found a Red Cross nurse outfit and made the Hitler Youth underwear to take care of me. Set Corso, the Hitler Youth, made the Red Cross into a swastika and pasted tear-shaped jewels under his eyes when he changed my bandages. But nothing I needed very badly was broken, so I was on my feet in a week. And Buffo swore I'd be tap dancing again, which was a joke because his favorite people were the Rockettes. But I secretly studied tap from a second-hand 25-cent Fred Astaire paperback. And one night before the show, I announced to 3 NYU students and a Caribbean astrologer that there would be a brief prologue that evening. And I signaled Corso to put on Mac the knife. And then I proceeded to do my 2 time steps, alternately, for 15 minutes, biting my tongue. The audience was understandably transfixed. But Buffo, when he came out of shock, ran up on stage and announced that next week I would do the full 4-hour version. And then he hit me in the face with a pie. I poured ketchup over his head. He slapped me in the face with a raw fish. I tap danced on his toes. He went on point and pirouetted. The blonde and the amputee got tired of waiting, came up on stage, went into their dance. We weren't about to quit, so Buffo let me have it with every insult in the operatic repertory. I counted with every wisecrack I remember from 4 million 1930s musicals. And as fate would have it, there was a critic from the Village Voices looking for deaf-mute boys. And he wrote us up that week as the latest thing in drama. And the next thing we knew, we had to hire a waiter. The reviewers came back. And soon about a zillion poets, diarists, novelists, and graffiti collectors found out that there was a place where they could produce plays and eat. So we had to hire a dishwasher, who had to be a frustrated set designer, and a host who had revolutionary ideas about costuming and lighting and menu layout. And somewhere in there, the middle 60s must have passed, because I believe it was in 1966, when I had a day off in the hospital, I noticed that there were 125 underground theaters listed in the papers. And 3 of our playwrights had books coming out. And one was on Broadway, and another had a TV show, and another had bleeding ulcers. That was me. That was the only time off I had in all those years. Because right about then, the vultures. No. Not vultures. Vultures eat dead things. Something that eats living things. Hyenas? No. Piranhas. Yeah, piranhas. Right about then, the piranhas moved in.
He was from a wealthy family, of course, but they had made their money themselves, and so they were still, you know, rough, charming, brawling Irishmen. Whereas she was from what they call very old money, and she would have been a career girl, a photographer if they hadn't been met. They were so happy. They loved that musical Camelot, tale of a distant, forgotten, beautiful kingdom that was always full of sunshine and justice. Camelot. I think maybe we all had a glimpse of Camelot once in our own lifetimes, before it crumbled.
They released us. I don't know why. I don't know why they arrested us. I don't know why anything. But I can answer the question I asked before. The reason it is all right to kill in war, but not to resist authority like all those misguided pacifists are doing back home, is that it's all right to kill in self-protection, but not all right to take sides. I know the chick feels this too. But we are too smart to put it into words. They are onto us. We will have to be very quiet when we go back to our beach, because we are going back, because we have to stay sane, right? Right, Buddha? Right!
The first being that they called a being was in 1967. That was the peak. There must have been 100,000 costume people tripping. It was Oz, Hollywood, and Mars. Boys were burning draft cards all across the country. They were burning ROTC buildings and armories. We were getting busted, bail out, and beaten. But it didn't matter. Not to me. There were some pretty scary things, too. There really was CIA and FBI people all around San Francisco. There were some pretty ugly things, too. Speed was heavy. A lot of people were getting sick and going crazy. Some people shouldn't take acid. I guess young kids in a bad environment. And drugs were becoming a big business too. People killed each other in Haight-Ashbury. I mean, young, turned-on people were killing each other over drug money. And we hear these stories that in New York they're having what they call speed wars, where speed freaks would turn paranoid and literally shoot each other out of windows over speed. I didn't like how the social structure was building up. But there was the Pentagon March. It wasn't like the newsreels or anything. I mean, the crowds were a lot bigger than they said, and the percentage of violence was a lot smaller. It just seemed like some of the boys were into running at the steps again and again and getting beaten. And some of the soldiers, young boys, were into running around among our tents and grabbing girls and clubbing them. A month afterwards, Robbie just sat in a corner, shivering and muttering to himself. We were used to the ones we loved freaking out a lot. It was part of putting no restrictions on each other. And we just loved.
What kept me sane all this time was something I do when I was alone. I bathed slowly in that oil, scented that oil. And then I'd wash and condition and dry my hair and get it all fluffy and lovely. And then I'd dust myself dry with perfume, dust and powder. And I'd do my nails, hand and foot. And I'd polish them with clear, a lovely, subtle, clear polish. And then I'd dress myself slowly in these things that I never ever wore anywhere else. Underwear, lingerie that was all pink and black lace, and stockings of silk. Not nylon at all, but silk. Dark and seamless, very expensive. And a gown that looked heavy with glitter but was actually lovely and light and clean. And these elegant little black silk pumps. And a single little diamond, a real one on a platinum chain. And then a boa that I'd gone crazy for and worked extra shifts at the Metropole to get. A huge, downy, soft white number that folded me like a cloud. And I'd stand before the mirror and remind myself of just what it was I wanted to do. The heart as big as the known world, the moon softly growing to fullness within me. My great dark eyes like the sable southwestern sky, my flesh like the petals of tender little flowers, my lips dark, precious, unique. The black rose. People were complaining that you couldn't tell one of the girls in the movies from another one anymore. They all looked alike. Ursula Andress wore blue. And you started hearing talk about how they didn't want any more movie stars. No more crazy actresses to demand huge salaries. They didn't care which woman they used. Nobody cared. Because all the audiences wanted was one Supergirl after another. The miniskirt mattered more than the girl, that James Bond didn't care who he fucked because they were all alike. And I guess that's the way they felt about them.
They made Kamala into a movie, but it wasn't really very, it was just a medieval pageant. It didn't have the beauty or the tenderness or the sense of something that could, really happen. And it was very sexy. It was very dirty for a musical. I didn't watch the second half at all. People don't seem to... I would have thought that there had been a lot of letters in the newspapers about them messing up the president's favorite musical like that. But there weren't. I guess people had forgotten little things like that. Like when you walk down on Orchard Street, the pushcart street down in the village where you can buy a lot of things cheap, you can see in some of the stores, tapestries, cheap things, tapestries, rugs, scarves, with his picture on them. Sometimes him and Bobby Kennedy and Martin Luther King, and sometimes all three of them with a picture of the first moon landing in the background. Well, One time I was down there just after this movie actress had died. I don't remember her name, but my mother was quite broken up about it. Anyway, they had replaced all the pictures of him with pictures of her. It was horrible. You know how the stores have the pictures in the frames that they're trying to sell? I mean, it's the frames that they want to sell, not the pictures. Well, instead of having his picture in the frame, or even him and Robert and Martin Luther King, they had these pin-up photos of this girl who had just died. Just because, well, not for any reason, just because she died. I mean, they seem to remember, and they seem to care, but they seem to have got it all mixed up.
I get 1967, 1968 confused. Jailed Huey and you. Shot Martin and Bobby. They murdered those 3 black students. Columbia blew up. The French Rebellion. The French cops beat down the May Rebellion in Paris, France. San Francisco would be just a junkie slum after the summer of peace and love. We all came back to New York to get ready for the Democratic Convention. Only now, everywhere you went, there were all these famous writers. Naylor, Ginsberg, William Burroughs, who I thought was a god, Georgenet, all of them writing about it as if it was some sort of romantic epic. People died in Chicago, people you never even heard about. They herded us around with guns and billy clubs and mace. I think the mace was in Chicago. I went through a plate glass window, but I was okay. But Robbie and his gang grabbed the cops' clubs and fought back. And they really hurt him. Them. I would never call a cop again for anything ever again. Not that they ever did anything in the places we lived in. If you did call them, except beat up girls and steal dope.
When I left the hospital, I couldn't do heavy work, so for a week I sat at the record player and watched the opera Buffo. I have to try to tell you what happened. The Buffo had been started by rejects, nomads, exiles, rebels, outcasts. So now that the establishment critics started selling the place on that basis, we started drawing the real grub, the junkies and the psychopaths. And the critics, who had always been a little ashamed of the place, started backing out, panning anything that wasn't obscure or secretive or meaningless like them. We never needed critics before. We sold sandwiches. So we lost the critics now, too, to the places that sold that obfuscation as dreck that needed critics to back it. The first success drove our old audience away, and then the critics drove away the new audience. And there was no one left but us independents that started it, and the sickies drawn to it by the signs of life. Now more and more we attracted not the real rebels or the real dropouts, but failures and phonies from uptown who just wanted to do whatever had been original and daring the year before. The new phony audience read the reviews and loved it. But for us, sanctity, privacy, gone. There was no other reward. The amount of work was unspeakable. And then I found out that Buffo and the others who I'd always worshipped for their energy and originality and brilliance and verve had just been on speed all those years. Well, I wore myself out learning to keep up with them, as witness the ulcers. The speed of the changes we're getting to, driving crazy, wrecking their health. They couldn't understand why horror and ugliness and obscurity were being praised. And Buffo started getting into heavier drugs. Started letting his junkie friends put on that sort of show at the Buffo. We were so tired. We all were. Exhausted. Like sea creatures left on the beach by the tide. Cut off from the element of their life. No. More like sea creatures helpless to leave their element while it slowly poisons in a settled, grimy muck.
We hear stories now. And I don't just mean stories of how it wasn't really Oswald that killed him, but it was really Johnson. or it was really Cubans, or oil millionaires, or communists, or Ruby, or all of them together. Or how the avant-garde theater people did all those awful parodies of Shakespeare. Or how the sincere Shakespeare people in the park revived anything that had the killing of the king in it. I think that some of those people mean well, but it's funny how they always seem to be making a bugbear, isn't it? I mean stories that make you wonder just how well people remember. Stories like that Jackie was paid $1 million just to stay with him because they really hated each other. Or that they were both homosexual. Or that he had a movie actress mistress. Or that he was in the pay of big industry. Or things that no one could know anyway, even if they were true. And you wonder, why do people want to speculate on such things when there's so much good to remember? When above all, the beauty that never even got to happen is still there for us to build. How they can blame her for getting married again. My God, just to get away from those people who were trying to make her into some kind of pin-up girl or clown when she was there. She was right there, beside him, closer than anyone in the world.
I think Chick is in league with the Viet Cong. He has lured us all down to the beach to subvert our minds. It all came to me last night. It is a very subtle plan. A time will come when we will be attacked by false MPs who are under Chick's command. We will all be driven down into the sea, where we will be picked up by giant Viet Cong submarines and transformed by plastic surgery into indistinguishable Cong soldiers. That is where they get their unending supply of troops. That is the truth behind the treasonable rumors of desertions from our own forces. Chick and a few more like him are in the pay of the Viet Cong. I could be wrong. They may be in the pay of the Soviet Russians. I think I even have some evidence that our own government is behind the whole thing. The MP attacks are to blind us to the fact that it is the government itself that is selling us drugs, perhaps. It doesn't matter. The important thing is that I am beginning to see some pattern in it all. Whoever it is trying to gain power over the whole world. That is not the same as wanting the world to be one as I do. Perhaps when the time comes, I will go willingly to be plastic surgery. I will go. I must go to find out. Even if I wind up being shot by my own ignorant buddies in broad daylight, it would be worth anything. Anything now to know the truth.
When he volunteered in Woodstock, they sprayed tear gas on us in the People's Park in Berkeley. I made him go. He wanted to go to Mexico. He wanted to run away. But when we started getting the vibes about Woodstock, I made him go. 500,000 people gathered together to defy what was going down. Robbie just looked at it all and said, kids standing out in the open, they don't know what's happening. They're going to drop an atomic bomb on us. They didn't. Sure, the press and the media ripped it off, but that's how you work within the system. You make them see what you are. You just say, let them fight for it now. I've had enough. He's into heroin, then we hear great stories about wonderful things like the strikes at Harvard and Berkeley and the priests burning the draft records and the GIs resisting the war and the march on Washington in November. And he'd just say, look at the streets. That was true. The streets between here and the house turned into the same things. Just kids. Streaming, hungry, drugged, diseased, hustling, stealing, crazy, marks chalked all over their faces, winking and twitching and muttering psychedelic pseudo-religious shit. Or black beggars, snarling and shivering. People would come from other countries and say, we want to be American. You're where it's at. How could you tell them we were licked? We were through. We weren't. We aren't. we thought it was an ego trip. Robbie was into something new every day. Hare Krishna, Catholic monasteries, or the conspiracy trials in Chicago. He was going to be a movie maker or weave beads. And then, for some reason, he decided that Vanessa Redgrave lived next to us, disguised as a Puerto Rican, taking tapes of our conversation. And that John Lennon was God, Mick Jagger was the devil, and Donovan was Christ. Christ. That was the winter of 68, 69. That was the winter that produced Let It Be and Bridge Over Troubled Water. That was how the 60s ended.
Yes, James Bond really didn't care because right about that time, all the men I knew turned gay, or were revealed to be gay all along, or maybe they just came out. It was certainly better than sleeping with Raquel Welch and cutting yourself on her. I didn't use down. She did a terribly difficult thing at a time when it just didn't pay to be a girl at all. She actually made people think about it. But it hasn't lasted. Apparently, I mean, nobody is that beautiful. To be that beautiful takes all one's time. There's no time to be beautiful inside, to be human, to be warm or fulfilling. Besides, all the reviewers prefer the drag queens. It's amazing. Esquire last month, this young boy who writes for them, he just flipped. He freaked over these 3 famous drag queens who were the guys I used to room with in 1961. So funny. If you told me at the start of the 60s that the competition would be drag queens. Wasn't there supposed to have been a sexual revolution in there somewhere? Weren't all these masks and disguises supposed to have been dropped? I mean, when Raquel Welch and a bunch of drag queens are the current sex symbols, isn't something wrong? What made them hate women? And men. What made them hate men? Is it just that there are so many people in the media and all have made them all so much alike? Is that why everything is harking back to another era? Any other era? Any freak, any monster, anything different? Why don't we want anything beautiful? Why don't we want anything beautiful to be, to exist, to live? Is it just overstimulation or what? Are we just instinctually avoiding reproduction? Stimulation, involvement, reproduction? Everybody's drunk. Everybody's drugged. Everybody's making TV commercials. There are no stars. What is wrong with them? What is wrong with me?
Chick is not in league with anyone. That is insane of me to think so. I have been innocently falling prey to the over-rationalistic Western tendency to try to connect everything in one great pattern, which is wrong because that is what makes men totalitarian. I have also been mistaking my own feelings and fantasies for actual facts, plus my own natural aggressive tendencies, which I cannot help, have misled me into projecting these territorial power fantasies onto other people. People are really good. They do the evil things they do for the same reasons that I have had these delusions. Because I am evil, but then so are they. But they are not, and I am not either. But someone must be. Someone!
But there are some of us who still try to go on. My work. I'm going to have my full teaching license in just another 3 years. I'm working with subnormal, what they call subnormal children out in Jersey. It's very hard to try and help them into the world. They are in minorities, children whom the culture has forgotten, children of 12 who can't speak because they've never been spoken to in their homes, children who are afraid of things that they can't even name, children without love or hope. Some of them may never be able to join the human race, but I can try. Today, I mentioned to them something about him, and not one of them, not a single one of them, knew who he was. It was for a moment as if he had never been, so I told them the story. but not all of them knew what a president was. One of them had never, can you imagine this, never even seen a television set. So somehow I wound up instead telling them the story of Camelot. I tried showing them that famous Life magazine with the color photos of the assassination, but it frightened one of them too badly. And two of the others just went crazy with excitement at the pictures of the blood. So I wound up telling them the story of Camelot, without all the sex stuff between Guinevere and Lancelot, of course. It's just about the same story. If I'd wanted to, I could have told them the story of Christ. Would have been about the same story.
Buffo was away sick or drugged or crazy a lot of the time now. And the new kind of people wouldn't show up to do their shows. And Corso, who was Buffo's lover, couldn't stand it and split. Buffo didn't know who to blame for what was happening. And news came that Corso had been killed in a motorcycle accident. Corso's family. So Buffo would vanish. The place was illegal anyway. We didn't know who to pay off the way Buffo did. We started laying summonses on the place. Ridiculous amounts. $1,000, $2,000 a week on a place that never cleared 100. There were all these awful vegetable people hanging around, watching it dry up, like zombies coming to life too late. Buffo was like a tiny, isolated island world of health. And they came. These creatures came stumbling into the underground from their blasted, sterile plague planet. More and more people left. Sometimes we spend all day, 2 or 3 of us getting the place together, scrubbing and shopping, wait tables, wash dishes, improvise a show when one didn't show up, and then sleep on the stage, unpaid, waiting for Buffo. He'd come in, if at all, blubbering, screaming, help me, help me, help me. For God's sake, son, please help me. Tell us all to go away. He'd throw chairs at us. Swear he was moving to a church, that he was building a church, that he was raising an Atlantean temple. Finally, they all went away. I closed up one night and working for Buffo. Buffo came back to the Buffo room. He put on the custody, locked the gates. Then he took a hatchet, cut off his hand, tried to cut off his foot. He hacked away at his neck and face, broke 2 ribs, and then succeeded in cutting open his stomach with 44 strokes. His guts fell out onto the stage. He lived for 4 days, died on Corso's birthday. Their parents wouldn't even let them be buried together. The critics named an award after him the next year. This is a recording. Wait 60 seconds to leave me a message.
Chick is a traitor. I have evidence now. Today we entered a bombed-out village where all the people were dead, except that a single Viet Cong soldier jumped at me from behind a pile of bodies and knocked me down and raised his bayonet over me, prepared to bring it down onto my head or possibly my neck. And Chick, my teacher Chick, who was relieving his bladder and should have continued to do so, Chick, groovy Chick, turned and shot the Kong in the head and sent him flying away. I got up and I thanked Chick, but he knew. I could tell by the expression on his face and by certain vibrations that he knew and I knew that he had betrayed everything that we believed in, because he took sides. At a time when there was no danger to his own life, Chick took sides and killed to save my life. We patted each other on the back. He gave me a cigarette, but I was not placated. Chick is a traitor, Mom. And he knows about you.
I won't do what those people do on television. Smile and pucker and have an orgasm about florets. I won't be dehumanized and robotized and dance around Dean Martin. I won't pose for the porny magazines. I won't go dark because I don't want to. I won't use women's lib to publicize my next picture. I won't sleep with any more second assistant stage managers to get an audition as a replacement in a role that some movie star's niece has already gotten no reviews for. I won't traipse around in the court of some famous drag queen hoping for a bit part in one of their vehicles. Marilyn wouldn't have. I know that much. Marilyn started late, but she was smart. She knew when to get out. She really started when she was 26. I turned 26 today. I just took 74 sleeping pills in my apartment a little while ago. I just came in here to knock them down.
Last big march was a march against the mining of the harbor of Norway. Besides the old chant of 1, 2, 3, 4, we don't want your fucking war. My friends were all wondering, what are we doing here? We've been marching since we were babies, and all we did was make Jane Fonda famous. Some people will tell you it ended when they murdered the students at Kent State, and everybody left the village. Or when the papers played up the drug cult murders. When the pop fan hit, all the kids got hooked on alcohol. When Hair opened and Abby Hoffman became a guest star. When Lyric got brain burned and the Beatles sued each other and Donovan retired to his private island as Dylan to his $1 million farm. And when Janice, Jimmy, and Jim died so young. And those were our heroes, the models of our lives. Men don't understand women's lib. Women can't dig gay power. The blacks don't need us. The Indians don't want us. And you kids are no use. My sister lives on Downers. My little brother is a 1950s fascist. He wrote me, fuck the revolution. I don't want anything collapsing on me. I want $50,000 a year. When I lose my looks, I'll overdose. They're selling 1960s nostalgia records already. The closest thing to a political cause is bisexuality. And the street between here and the house just turned into this just junkies, black bums, and rapists. We did some good. We did. They didn't stop the war, but they reduced it. Pornography is legal almost everywhere. They slowed down their stupid space program, and corruption at the top was blown wide open. Sure, people are hungry, tired, and weak and disillusioned, but isn't that a sure sign that something's crumbling? I mean, like I try to tell Robbie, this is the time when action is needed of some kind, when new leaders are needed. He just backs into the corner of this dump we're living in on welfare fraud and waves his fix at me and yells, sure, let's fight for peace, let's fight for freedom, I'm all for it. What do you want me to do? Where do you want me to start? Who do you want me to kill? What do you want me to be? Lee Harvey Oswald?
We are safe, Mom. Chick is dead. They do not check every little battlefield casualty for autopsies. And anyway, I used a Kong rifle. My tour of duty is over now, Mom. Whoever is actually in control has decided that I am to be sent to what they call a methadone clinic in New York. What it actually is, I do not know. I must spend some time there being further indoctrinated, but then I will be coming home to make the world a better place to live in. Now I know how.
after they'd understood the story. It was hard to explain to them why it had all been so wonderful. There's no one like that now. They can't even imagine anyone like that. They grow used to the idea that the world is just a swamp of violence, and crooked politics, and unexpected death, and ugliness everywhere. They can't understand that there was a time, a space of several years, when everyone loved someone bigger and better than other people. They can't understand that all the people, everyone in the world loved him. All but one.